So prior to beginning this evening's board meeting, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our prior special board meeting.
Moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth,
Yes.
Dr. Gase,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Dr. McBride.
Yes. Thank you. Now, welcome everybody this evening to our regular board meeting. I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Perry?
Dr. McBride,
Here.
Mr. Perez,
Here.
Dr. Gase,
Here.
Mr. Kizabeth,
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Next, we will adopt the agenda. Mrs. Perry, are there any amendments?
I have none.
So I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Perry?
Dr. Gase,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. McBride.
Yes. This brings us on to item number 3, which is always one of the best parts of what we do here, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bose.
Thank you, Dr. McBride. And as you just said, this is obviously a highlight each quarter for all of us, I'm sure, in awarding our prestigious Crystal Apple Award to 2 of our staff members. Mr. Richards, would you like to come up here with me, please? And I'd first like to call our classified staff winner, Mrs. Jackie Salm, up to the podium, please. Jackie? Mrs. Salm was nominated by Tim Weber, our technology supervisor. Jackie Salm attended Tiffin City Schools and graduated from Columbian High School. Afterwards, she completed a medical office transcription training program. Jackie held a variety of positions as her husband moved with the military around the United States. All of these positions helped her develop skills she brought to her job at Columbian. Some of these positions included retail store manager, marketing and advertising specialist, quality specialist, reception office manager. Her family returned to Tiffin in 1998, where she stayed home with her kids and worked part-time. Jackie started with Tiffin City Schools in 2005 in the technology department, but was moved to an educational aide position in the elementary for several years, but has now moved back to the technology department. And let me say that we are all very pleased with that. So thank you. In the area of teamwork, this is what Mr. Weber had to say about Jackie. Jackie Salm's vocabulary does not contain the following sentence. That's not in my job description. She is invested in the technology department as the technician assistant with the desire to make it a well-organized, person-friendly office. For several years, Jackie worked as an educational aide at Washington Elementary. In this position, she worked with teachers and other staff to encourage the little ones to succeed. Plus, she showed her unselfish acts of kindness by assisting the many teachers at Washington with their technology problems. In the area of commitment, Mr. Weber says Jackie joined the technology department in the summer of 2021. She assisted in reorganizing the department's filing system. For the first time since 2006, the department is all under the same roof, which now allows for a better solution to solving issues and working closer as a department for communication and technical needs. In the area of leadership, when the technology director was off last October with COVID, Jackie called a meeting with 2 technicians to assign who was going to be responsible for what areas. With her past experiences, she was able to assume the leadership role and keep the department running efficiently. Jackie has also assisted in creating a new spreadsheet in the area of financial and loaning of devices to staff and students. In the area of taking pride in her work, Mr. Weber says Jackie is the face that greets our students, staff, and teachers when they walk into our shop every day. She graciously welcomes individuals and determines their problems. She takes the time to record all of the information, assess any damage, and inform the persons of any monetary responsibilities if it is necessary. Jackie orders the parts and keeps excellent records of all parts and devices. She is also very well versed at troubleshooting certain technology items. In the area of outstanding accomplishments, Tim just said that Jackie has been an asset to the technology department and deserves bouquets for all of her hard work. Thank you, Jackie, for all you do for our students, staff, and our families. Congratulations on receiving the Crystal Apple Award. We're very proud of you.
Just want to say thank you, and I appreciate being part of the Tiffin City School family. And I have a great group of guys that I work with, and the teachers I worked with in the past. I just love them and I miss them. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Our second award winner for our certified staff is Ms. Rachel Galleto. Rachel, please come forward. Rachel is an intervention specialist at Tiffin Middle School, and she was nominated by Mr. Judd Lutz. Rachel grew up in Tiffin and attended Washington Elementary, West Junior High, and Tiffin Columbian High School. After high school, she attended Bowling Green State University, where she received a Bachelor's of Science and Master's degree in special education. Rachel also attended Ashland University, where she received her certification in administration and supervision. During this time, she taught at Sandusky City Schools, Seneca East Local Schools, Bellevue City Schools, before coming to Tiffin City Schools. Rachel has been teaching for Tiffin City Schools since 2006, bringing experience and a wide range of knowledge to our school system. In the area of teaching, this is what Mr. Lutz had to say about Rachel. Rachel Galleto is a student-centered educator. She is constantly working on her craft of teaching and is a lifelong learner herself. She is a patient educator who uses a combination of empathy, humor, and accountability to help her students grow. Rachel completely embodies the idea of students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. In the area of commitment, Mr. Lutz says, Rachel's desire to help never goes unnoticed, and going the extra mile for her students is a huge asset to the middle school. She never has to worry about fighting over a parking spot because Rachel takes great pride in arriving to school by 6 a.m. every day and ready to positively influence her students. Last year, Rachel gave up her planning time to help a student consistently one-on-one. This is not typical and far above and beyond the call of duty. Even when the attempt was made to talk her out of giving up all her time, she refused because she wanted to be able to say she did everything in her power to provide a positive result for the student. In the area of leadership, Rachel provides leadership to our building based on her example and consistency every day. She provides an exemplar experience for all our staff to strive towards. She is not afraid to speak up when she knows there is a better way or when something just is not right. In the area of, oops, I'm sorry, I'm not done yet. There has been times when a student may not be getting the absolute best resources needed to be successful, and Rachel will fight for those students to be sure they have what they need to become the best they can be. In the area of student-centered, Mr. Lutz says Rachel is always student-centered in her thoughts and planning process. She goes the extra mile to be sure all of her students have the best chance for success. Already this school year, she met with a parent to construct a detailed plan for a student who is struggling a little bit with the transition to the Tiffin Middle School. This resulted in creating 5 keys for success for the student that she would help track along with the student, parent, and staff. When she does things like this, peers and middle school parents see how hard she is willing to work to help students improve. They are all encouraged and inspired to do the same. And outstanding accomplishments, Judd wasn't aware of any awards at this time, but her accomplishments includes every student that she has helped in some way. Thank you, Rachel, for all you do. For our students, staff, and families, congratulations on receiving the Crystal Apple Award. We're very proud of you. Thank you, Dr. McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Buzz. Thank you to both of our recipients and for your commitment to the district and all you do. This will bring us up to item number 4, which is our reports, beginning with, nope. Oh, sorry. You're right. There's another presentation. Sam Faber from Space Camp for interested visually impaired students.
Okay, let's retry this. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm a sophomore at Columbian High School, and I have a visual impairment. My teacher for the visually impaired sent me some information about a sponsorship to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. And for fun and for some practice for college essays, we wrote two 250-word essays about why I should go to Space Camp. And a few weeks later, we got a phone call. I got accepted into Space Camp. This is really exciting for us. I was really excited to go. My teachers are happy for me. And so I'm here to show you what I did. Here are some pictures of spacesuits that they had and different things. Oh. Okay, so we had to do missions throughout the week. We had 2 one-hour missions and one 3-hour mission. And for the first mission, I was the flight director in mission control. And so whenever there was an anomaly, I had to help figure out a solution to the issue. And also, so for these missions, we had to fly an orbiter into orbit and land it back onto Earth successfully. For all 3 of our missions, we did. For our second mission, I got to be a mission specialist. Here's me as the flight director looking at our information screen where we can see every little information about the mission. Here is the shuttle that we had to fly. And here I am in a mechanical arm that I could control. And as a mission specialist, or for a second mission, I had to help repair the satellite. That was insane to me. I had never done anything like that. Never gone into an arm and up into doing that. Like, and I even got to control it, which was cool to me. Okay. So, and for our third mission, I was the flight director and the medical director. So whenever there was a medical issue, I had to help with that. I got to go scuba diving during my trip. This was my highlight of the trip. It was a 24-foot deep chamber. And before we could even go down, we had to learn how to breathe on with the scuba tank on, what to do if it fell out with our eye goggles and everything. Being down there was surreal. I mean, you could jump up, and it was meant to simulate moon gravity, and that was really cool. They had 2 bowling balls down there. When you picked up that bowling ball, it wasn't like a 15-pound bowling ball. It felt like a basketball. But when it fell, it had the force of a bowling ball. This is the multi-axis trainer. It is a chair on 3 rings, and it spins you around. And the cool thing about it is that you don't get dizzy when you're on it. The center of gravity is your stomach, so your stomach isn't taking that. This is called the pamper pole. It is a 40-foot pole that we had to climb and jump off of. Before I scare you here, there was people, our entire group of people. So we were in a team of about, I think, 20 or so people. And so everyone had to work together as a team to keep whoever was up on that pole safe and in the air. And in case they fell off, they wouldn't just go like falling under the ground. And so when I went up this pole, there was a disc up there that I just stand on top of, and it spun around, and it was barely big enough for me to stand on. And then I had to jump off of it and do different things. That was pretty cool too. I think I was one of 5 people to do that. One of 3 people to get to the top. This is a rock wall. This is nothing new. I've done rock walls many times before, but it was really, a really fun part of the space camp. I was one of 5 people to complete that. Oh, here's another picture of me at the top. This is the 1/6 gravity chair. Basically, it's a chair that is connected to bungee cords, and when you jump, it simulates 1/6 gravity. And so if you jumped 1 foot, if you had the force of jumping 1 foot, you would jump 6 feet. They kind of limited on us, sadly, but it was really fun. Okay. After I came back from the trip, I visited Lincoln Preschool and talked to a few classrooms of preschoolers about my trip, and I got to meet the librarian's son at Tiffin at the high school. It was very interesting to meet him, and he has a condition like I do. He has a visual condition, and it was fun to meet somebody younger who has a condition like mine. Uh-oh. I think the remote died. Oh, okay. Throughout the week, we had different engineering challenges, and one of them was we got split up into 2 groups, well, actually 4 groups, but then into 2. We got split into a 1 team, 2 separate teams, and then 2 groups in each team. One group had to create a rover to move rocks down a slope and like try to reach a goal, and then the other group had to create something to move rocks into a bucket. And our group completed so fast that the instructors of the challenge made us work a little bit harder and figure out what to add to it. And our group did end up collecting the most rocks for that. Another engineering challenge that we had to do was to create an insulator or a heat shield for an egg. And it had to be under direct flame for 3 minutes and not melt. We got split into 2 groups for that. My group did not beat that. It may not have survived at all, but it was fun and we learned about insulators. So at the museum, there was a replica of the International Space Station, and there was different things in there, and we saw a space toilet. And when they're in space, they don't have normal toilets because they don't have gravity like we do. So they have a special toilet as a vacuum on it, and it just sucks all that up. Each day we had different classes about different topics. We had a space history, space law, space current events, and astronomy class. The space law one was really cool. We got to learn about what people can and cannot do in space. We also got to build rockets that we launched throughout later in the week. I did not build mine correctly, so it did not get to launch. But again, it was fun to watch, and other people had rockets, so I got to watch their rockets launch. Early in the week, we got to meet 3 blind NASA employees, and it was interesting to learn about what it's like to be in a competitive field, and having a disability. And I think everyone there learned a little bit about how the ups and downs of having a disability and being in the work field. At the beginning of camp, our chaperones kind of helped us a little bit. And they helped us a lot, actually. But throughout the week, they let the reins go. We had to figure out how to do things on our own, and that was a very good teaching moment. Every morning we woke up at 6:45, and sometimes I didn't get to go to bed until 11 or 12 at night. They kept us busy all day long. We had occasional rest, occasional downtime, but not really enough to say that we had a lot. And then also, as part of me being back, Ms. Gallardo and Mrs. Bupp at the middle school offered me to come and present to some sixth graders, so I'm very excited for that as well. On the last day, we had a graduation, and this is my diploma, and it actually has Braille on it, which is really cool. Our team got the Commander's Cup for scoring the most points during our engineering challenges and missions. Honestly, I have no clue how we did that, but we did it somehow. And then also I earned 2 merit badges for Boy Scouts and extra credit, or not extra credit, college credit for being there for the week. That's all I have. Thank you for having me.
Samuel, I want to thank you for applying. I am so glad you got to go. What a great experience. And I'm telling you what, I am extremely jealous. What a great experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. And again, congratulations.
Yeah. Mr. Kisbeth, I have to join in your jealousy. I've been to the museum in the Rocket City out there and saw the signs for Space Camp and got a t-shirt, but I couldn't do that. And I'm like amazed that he got to do this and to see the parts of the shuttle, the arm and all that stuff wow. And thanks for going and representing us so well out there.
Thank you, Sam. We also have another presentation.
Yes, as part of our process to explore facilities, and we've talked about this at previous board meetings, a group of us, we've tried to secure an architectural firm for pre-bond services, just so I can make certain it's made clear again. This is not saying, here's what we're doing for facility process. It is, let's talk about our needs and talk about how to come together to solve the problems and the challenges that we have in our district. We've gone through a process. We solicited an RFQ, a response for quotes. We had 9 submissions, which is a significant number of submissions, and it shows, I think, that Tiffin is a desired area for people to try to do work in. Out of those 9, we had a steering committee that was comprised of 2 board members, and they can speak to this as well, because they've been a part of this now through every step. Also some community members and some staff to look at what we thought would be the best group to go with. We shortlisted those 9 down to 3 firms. We had presentations last Wednesday for those 3 firms. Wednesday, right? Yeah. For those 3 firms, and the committee was unanimous in their selection of TDA Architects, Then Design Architecture. And so to make certain that the community could have at least a little bit of access as to some of what was done, we've asked TDA to come back and basically do the same presentation that they did for our committee moving forward, so that everybody, the rest of the board, could see, and that the whole community would be able to see. They can't see what everybody did, but they can at least see what TDA presented and why we've kind of selected them to be our pre-bond service architecture firm moving forward. So, Robert, am I turning it over to you and then letting you go with the group? All 4 of you together. It's a team effort. This is the whole team that presented to us last time. So I think we said it's probably going to be the same presentation that you did on Wednesday. So I'll turn it over to them from TDA Architecture.
Well, good evening. Those are two hard acts to follow, let me tell you. And Bob, I've changed my career goal. I now want to go to space camp. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you to the Board of Education for giving us the opportunity to present our qualifications tonight. Again, it'll be the same presentation that we gave. There we go, last Wednesday. So we'd like to start off with our team introductions. My name is Cheryl Fisher. I'm an educational planner here at TDA. I will be the primary point of contact for the pre-bond project. I have about 23 years of experience in master planning for school facilities. 15 of that I served as an assessor and master planner on behalf of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, the OFCC. Some recent project experiences include both Oberlin City Schools and Fremont City Schools in terms of pre-bond projects. I would encourage you to reach out to Fremont Schools, talk to Tom Anway, John Detweiler, and ask about our performance on those projects.
Good evening, everyone. I am Claire Bank. I will be serving as the educational design lead for this project. And what that means is that I'd be working closely with all of you to understand your curriculum, look at your existing facilities, see what's working really well and maybe what's not, and then to build the program and any plan for the facilities around your curricular goals. Up there are some of the districts I have worked with over the years, so you may be familiar with some of them. And then just as a fun fact for me, is that in high school, I ran for Berkshire High School, and one of my favorite events of the year was always your cross-country carnival, so I was excited to return to this neck of the woods. So yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for having us. My name is Ryan Caswell, and at TDA, I'll be serving as kind of a community engagement and a content creator for this project, and really understanding how important community engagement is throughout the life of an architectural project. We have found a lot of success in kind of marrying some of those communication services with some of the design aspects that are going on. And so that's something that I'll be able to help in this project. I got my degree back when I graduated architecture school, so I kind of started in that world and then took a hard left turn into basically documentary filmmaking for quite a few years, and then learned a lot of engagement techniques and have been able to find ways to marry those two technologies. Because as Sam brought me back, but back in 2006, I was on the design team for the U.S. Space and Rocket Center down in Huntsville, Alabama. And we were designing 3D models that were released to the NASA scientists who are approving those exterior designs. So seeing that, it really brings me back. But it's those sorts of activities we think that during the life of especially public architecture, we can find different ways to tell that story and engage with the community.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Fiala, and I'm the founding partner and executive chairman for TDA, and I have the honor of working with these very talented young professionals. You'll see a few of my projects, a few we'll talk about a little bit later. The Willoughby Slate Schools is a pretty impressive joint use facility. Independent Schools, a joint use facility. But what's interesting perhaps to you is I worked with the college president of Heidelberg University, Dr. Rob Huntington, years ago in developing the fundraising for and the construction of the field improvements they had at their stadium. That includes the press box, bleachers, entrance plaza, and the turf replacement. And a project I'm really proud of is, you'll see, it's the Cleveland Metropolitan School District P16. This was a privately funded educational initiative aimed partially at the students, but really aimed at parents of students. They were wraparound services to help teach parents how to help teach their children. And the intent of this was really to provide a pathway from poverty for the Cleveland School District children who are really mightily struggling. A fun fact for me is I have another job. I'm the mayor of the city of Willoughby. It's a small community about 20 minutes north and east of Cleveland. And we are about 24,000 square feet. We also have a historic downtown, not quite to the scale of Tiffin, but quite similar to it. You will have here in Tiffin the access to 50 professionals. That's our firm size. But in a minute, you're going to see a note. Of the 50 professionals, 25 of them, about half of, not about half of our staff are licensed professionals. That's important to note only that we don't have the starting lineup and the backups and a third team and a squad team. We have a first team and second team only. We'll talk about us just a pinch. We'll talk about some of our master planning services and some case studies. And then with the permission of the board and the superintendent, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. We're communicating with this, right? There we go. Thank you. So about us. We were initially founded in 1951 by Bruce Houston, S. Houston Associates. I purchased that company in 1989 and rebranded it as TDA at Bruce Houston's request. Bruce did not want his name, and in fact, he said no principal's name should be associated with a design firm. A firm is made up of many people, and not one person should bear either the glory or the infamy associated with running a firm. So we all share it together. 70 years in business, but what's really important are two things. Since 1953, we have done almost exclusively K through 12 education throughout the state of Ohio. And in fact, in 2022, we were ranked in the Cleveland metropolitan area, the third largest architectural firm in the region, but the only architectural firm that devotes more than 80%, 90% of its work is dedicated to K-12 education. We have done over $1 billion of pre-K through 12 construction over the last 10 years. Thanks for the help if you're doing that. Thanks. But what's really important to note, highlighted in yellow, is are all the projects that we have done with the OFCC. About 80% of our projects are funded by the state, so we have a working knowledge of the state and their requirements.
All right.
I'm leaving that for you.
Thank you. Oh, we're the same height, Bob. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about our master planning process and what that entails. But first, again, a big thanks to Mr. Richards, Mr. Daniel. We met, they entertained us about a week and a half ago, let us come out and spend a good half a day out in your facilities, touring them, learning about the history of the facilities as well as the district. So it was invaluable. We had many takeaways, but I'd like to just talk about two of them very briefly. The first one, our main key takeaway was the importance of transparency throughout this master planning process with the community and their involvement. That was our number one key takeaway. And second was realizing that this project can really become a catalyst for the district to kind of reset your mark as the educational lighthouse within the region. Oh boy. I might need your help. All right. Oh, went one too far. That's all right. You can leave it. Forward. I'm just going to rely on you. Okay, so our master planning process really has 5 key main phases. We've kind of jumped to the second one, but the first one is the actual validation phase. And the first thing we would recommend to the school district is to form a facilities committee that is a cross-section of your community, first and foremost, if you haven't done that already. In the validation phase, we're spending a lot of time going through the OFCC assessments and making sure that they're brought up to speed to current scope, condition, and cost. And sneak peek, we kind of took a look at the high school, that all the assessments were done around 2008, and there are items in there that aren't valid right now. I'll use window replacement as an example. Those were replaced in 2015, but they're still in the assessment with a $2 million price tag to replace. So we want to make sure that it's 100% accurate, because if it's not, it taints the validity really of the assessment and the whole process. So now we're on the second phase, which is the research phase. And I kind of refer to that as looking at all of the data outside of the OFCC umbrella, because they just look at cost, really. But we really, and Claire is very heavily involved in this phase. What we want to do is understand how the buildings respond to your educational program, how they function. We call that educational adequacy. I want to point out through every section, through every phase, we are constantly meeting with the facilities committee. We are constantly having dialogue and interaction with the community through various media chains and channels, which Ryan will talk more about that. But now we'll move into the next phase. Thank you. Now we have all the information that we need to make informative master plan options with the facilities committee, with the OFCC, with the district, and so forth, that directly respond to the educational needs of your district. Again, continuing to channel communication with, if we can go to the next one, with the community. We take those master plan options and then present them to the community, again, through various media channels and communication. And we have this constant dialogue back and forth to get their feedback, their understanding, their interpretation of the pros and cons and likes and dislikes about the master plan options that have been generated. That dialogue may continue back and forth several times. It may only take a few times. It's totally dependent on the unique circumstances of your school district. We may utilize even community meetings, again, surveys to get additional community feedback from people who aren't able to attend the meetings themselves. But then that leads us to the last master plan phase, which is finalization of the master plan. Now we've had that dialogue, and at this point it should be pretty clear and concise about what the preferred master plan is, and we'll make that recommendation to the board with assurance that we feel with confidence that that chosen master plan is one that is digestible and acceptable to your community. One last thing before we leave the master plan project process. You'll note there's no dates. There's no timeline on it. Again, it's all very fluid and adaptable for the duration of each phase, specific for your school district.
All right, I'm going to try and give this clicker a whirl, and we'll see if it works for me. So far, not so good. Okay. But as Cheryl mentioned, right, the facility master plan process it's a longer process, and it takes as long as it needs to develop and arrive at a plan. And really all throughout that process, there is this communication back and forth with not only the community, but also with educators in the district, students sometimes. There's a variety of different stakeholder groups. And I think what we've seen really over the last couple of years, and especially coming out of COVID, is just the importance of that, especially when maybe prior we could have gotten 100 people out in a community meeting. Sometimes you may only get 20 or 30 or 40. And so we really try to find ways through digital means or sort of modern technology to find ways to reach those folks and engage them throughout this process. And again, this slide kind of speaks to just a couple different ways that, the district may be familiar with in past efforts, but it's like whether we're creating print materials to kind of get the message out that way, delivered in person or sent home with students, and just continuing to educate during that process on what's going on. But also, through renderings, hand-drawn, as well as 3D models. And then down below, through a lot of different in-person meetings and ways to kind of portray the master plan process. I think it can be very abstract. And so we found a lot of success, again, really trying to combine a bunch of different communication methods, whether that's in person and then creating narratives and putting that out online so that other people, where you may reach 50 people in one room, you can open up a pool to sort of the community or the online audience and then really try to reach like 10 times that amount. So, surveys, online surveys have become more prevalent. And again, we like to find ways sort of as a communications department, partnering not only with the school district and what their efforts are doing, but also with the architects and the educational planners to kind of best find the channels for that information to get out. But honestly, we recognize that the process doesn't really stop there. So it's communicating that out. But in Brecksville Broadview Heights, which is a community, recently they did an elementary school consolidation where the government entity, so the city, had actually built a really large field house on the back of that. So it was this cool partnership between those two. And so not only were we partnering kind of on the front end as they were going through master planning, but even throughout design and construction, we were finding ways to kind of keep the community updated and engaged. And it looks like our presentation has crashed, but a computer is over there if we need to tie back into the presentation, but find ways to celebrate that again through video productions and kind of bringing out the stories of that ribbon cutting once the building opened so that more people could see it. And I think with that one specifically, there you go, that slide right there. That one specifically, I think we had about 75 people who were there attending. But then once that story was kind of put out there, we had about 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people who engaged with it afterwards. So again, it's just trying to find all those different channels to get that story out. It's the same thing throughout, again, that master planning process. Not only do we engage with some of the educators during that, but also students. You know, we want their voices to be heard in this as well. And again, it was another kind of city partnership with the school district. This particular community was partnering together. We wanted all of those voices to be heard, and then that story to be told in a single video production that a variety of their stakeholders could share out. And this was a way to do it. I think we spent 2 days both in the schools and then in City Hall collecting interviews and shots and then kind of compiling that again into one sort of concise narrative that, let's face it, right? Like 80% of people are on mobile devices nowadays. And so we need to be able to package these stories into that medium so that people can kind of get it the easiest way they can. So that kind of being an example of that. And then educational visioning. Again, sometimes this is helpful during the assessment process, but then also as it transitions from that into potentially a project, pulling all of those stakeholders together into a room and then devising, again, working with the designers in the district, devising activities to kind of garner that input from folks and then repackaging that, whether that's through a web technology or a printed report that can then be sent out to the community to kind of keep them lockstep with the project as it develops. So we're really thrilled to kind of work with some of these public entities to tell those stories because there's so much going on that's a good, really, in a public school system. And we really like to try and shine a light not only on that, but on the process in general. So that's really just a little bit about some of those things that can be done. But now we're going to go into just a few case studies. Bob will walk us through that and the team as we kind of move forward.
Oh, did you want to talk about Freeman?
I'll take it from here.
Okay.
So one of the projects you may be familiar with is Fremont High School, Fremont Ross High School. And this was an interesting project only because it took us 2 times to get this to win. And the first time, as we worked through the process and took it to a vote, we failed by about 4%. So we went back, we reevaluated the program, we made some changes, we brought it back to the voters, and we won by a 65% positive vote. The building, as you probably know, has been recently opened. We know they are rivals of yours, and we promise we'll do a better job for you than we did for them. Some interior shots of Fremont Ross. It's been a great success story and a great relationship with both their district administration, their faculty, and the families that live there. And here you see kind of a composite of many of the districts that we recently worked with in the past years. We're going to talk about 3 today. One is Cuyahoga Falls. The first one will actually be Willoughby East Lake Schools, and the last one will be North Ridgeville, because I think they tell in a quick snapshot kind of the how we work with our clients and our deliverables. And it is Cuyahoga Falls first. My apologies.
Yes, that's all right. No, you did that much better than I could have. Yes, so 3 projects that we feel are very relative to the Tiffin City Schools project. And we want to launch it with, very briefly, with the Cuyahoga Falls City School District. This project is very near and dear to my heart, as I mentioned in our presentation last week, because we really build relationships with the community, with the school district, and all the stakeholders in the project. They mean something to us. I cried so many times at this district, especially when it culminated into a successful bond issue. I might need your help again. Apparently, I can't do this very well. Okay, so I'm going to try to be brief. They started this project back in 2013. Another architect, we weren't involved in the time, and they developed a master plan for a new middle school, high school project. They did that together with their architect and the commission, very much in a vacuum. There was no community involvement. Placed it on the ballot in 2015, and it failed. I'll let you do it. I'm just dependent on you now. Okay. So when the district took a pause in about 2017, they decided they wanted to try again, put out an RFQ for architecture services, and we were chosen this time. So we really spent the first part listening to the feedback of the community about what happened during the first master planning process, because we weren't involved. And the glaring thing we heard was that there was no transparency between the school district and the community in the master planning process. They were not involved at all. Again, as I said, done in a vacuum. So we took and digested that information and decided to launch and reset the master planning process with an educational visioning session. And that really entailed about almost 100 people that were a cross-section of the community, students, parents, that came together to really, for a full-day session, to understand what the educational goals are for the district. So that was very, very just compelling, mind-blowing, really, at some of the data that we learned. Because transparency was so important, we did something we've never done with any district before and haven't done since, and we made every facilities committee meeting a public board meeting. The board was completely on board with this because transparency they knew was imperative. We ended up having about somewhere between 20 and 30 committee meetings over a 9-month period that were open public board meetings. 100 transparency about what was being discussed, how the process came about, and all the activities that went into the master planning process. One of the big takeaways, and this was very early on in the facilities committee meetings, was, and you could see a picture on the left from an actual written table. We worked in groups, and they said the importance of this project, it needs to focus on unity of the community. There needs to be something in for everybody and buy-in from anybody, and we need to bring the community together with this project. Thank you. So that theme, community, actually ended up being the theme of the bond issue. As you can see from the t-shirts, there were no vote yes, this, that. It was all community with unity highlighted. And here's the biggest thing. The master plan that was developed by the facilities committee was the same master plan that was developed the first time around, except this time it had participation of the community through the facilities committee and the communication with the community, which gave them ownership, which gave them which enabled them to promote the bond issue. And it was successful when we placed it on the ballot in 2019.
I'll say, just to add even to the Cuyahoga Falls story there, again, that communication continued on throughout the design process. It landed with additional community meetings where we built a physical model, to bring folks in to try and show them the developed plans. And then also for visual preferencing, what do you want the outside of this building to look like? We gave everyone a homework assignment and said, go choose your favorite building in your community and let's talk about it and see how that can marry together. And there were just a couple different activities like that during the design process, even after the assessments and all of that happened, there was this continuing conversation, throughout that. And so really, it's been a success story that's really ended in a groundbreaking. And I think we can go to the next slide and the next, that really just happened a couple of weeks ago. So we're all kind of celebrating that and seeing that kind of come to fruition.
And this is our home district, Willoughby East Lake Schools. This is and we are a merger of two school districts. East Lake City Schools, Willoughby City Schools, many years ago merged. So we have 2 high schools in the district, 2 middle schools, and then elementary schools. This project located in Willoughby is about the whole project scope is about $120 million. This project is about 80 of that 120, and it includes, what's unique about it, it includes a joint use facility that includes the YMCA, the Willoughby Senior Center, and the high school. And the large block you see in the middle is a field house that we jointly share. And the field house has 4 courts, 2 courts are owned by the school district, 1 court owned by the YMCA, 1 court owned by the senior center. You'll see the Y in the lower left, that was about $9 million. The senior center's the lower right, that was about $6.5 million. And in order, and by the way, this project was interesting because we actually broke ground as the architect for this project, but cut the ribbon as the mayor of the project. I got elected before this project was done. And there's the interior of their student commons. And there's the field house I mentioned. And the art now is scheduling a joint use facility. We've learned so much. It's very complex. There's huge security issues between seniors, YMCA members, and kids intermixing. And so it took us a little time to understand how to make that work and work successfully. View of the YMCA. The district built a competitive pool both for Eastlake North and Willoughby South teams. However, they turned the operations of that pool over to the YMCA. They realized that they weren't in the pool business, they were in the educating business. And so what they did is paid for the pool, but the operations are done by the YMCA. And this is the senior center. This is the Eastlake North. And Eastlake North, we took a little bit different approach. It's a brand new ground-up building. And we focused on athletics at South because we had the Y in the senior center there. At Eastlake North, what we did is we built a brand new performing arts center. And Eastlake North now is a hub for the performing, the humanities, if you will. All plays for both schools, Eastlake North and Willoughby South, are here at Eastlake North. And then we also did a small elementary school, Longfellow Elementary, that's in Eastlake.
North Royalton City Schools is another district that we've had a pretty long relationship with that we recently completed their facilities. So they early on were struggling to pass a bond issue. They had focused a story around really the needs of the district from a facility standpoint, but not so much the educational opportunity that could come out of it. So when we entered the picture, we worked with them to refocus on the educational opportunities that could occur if you really were restarting and having an opportunity to look at all your facilities holistically. So as we've already described, the educational visioning gets a lot of people in the same room and gets a lot of voices so that you can understand the priorities of the community from community members and from staff and from students all in one place. After redefining that and going out, they successfully passed a bond issue. But then part of the other reason that was so successful for them was that they managed to identify a plan that hit on something for everyone within the district. So they did consolidate their elementary school. This was a new elementary. They had a number of district-owned properties in the district, and they vetted those locations with the community, saw which one really would make sense from a central location with their community members. Their middle school, they did very selective work within, just doing some media center renovations because it was in really good shape. So media center and then some safety and security upgrades for that building. And then the high school was a mixture. They had some that really was in great shape, that didn't need much other than renovation work, some areas that they wanted to take down, and then they had some expanded program as far as educational opportunities that they wanted to offer, so they did an addition at that building. So with the educational goals that they had set, they resulted in having some spaces that they didn't used to have. So one of the questions that started to occur once the elementary school in particular was open were things about how to use some of the collaborative spaces that they had, which the high school also had provided in the renovations. So we wanted to get out ahead of that and really open it up, put together this story that explained how those spaces were being used. We were able to just go into the buildings and document how staff and students were using those and share that with the community so they understood as well. So with that, we hope that we selected some examples that really highlight the project goals that we were understanding going into this. So making sure to be very transparent with the community, get community ownership behind any plan forward, looking at the educational opportunities that can come out of a project such as this. And I think we would like to open it up to questions if there are any questions from everybody else.
Well, I was going to just start and seeing if Mr. Kisbeth or Mr. Williams, since they served on that committee, if they wanted to be able to just provide a little bit of background on the selection process. And yet again, just so we can make sure anybody that's listening at home knows, this is not the group that's going to say, here's what we're doing. The steering committee that was put together is going to work with TDA now to come up with a plan on how to get that feedback on how to be able to move forward. So I didn't know if maybe Mr. Williams or Mr. Kisbeth might want to chime in on that.
You mentioned earlier that we started with 9 firms and went down to 3 and then picked TDA. I just want to say TDA has 70 years of experience and have worked with 120 school districts. Among other districts in the area, the TDA firm was responsible for the development of a master plan for the new 9 through 12 building and 4 new elementary buildings in Fremont. They developed the football complex at Heidelberg University. With Lexington schools, TDA explored master plan options to compare new buildings versus renovations. TDA made an enthusiastic and informative presentation of their services. They stressed community involvement and hit transparency very hard. We felt that transparency piece was very important for the residents of this school district. The representatives of TDA were very thorough in their presentation as they presented a master plan, including work from a validation phase where they conduct physical assessments and validations of existing buildings, to a research phase, which would include staff and community surveys, to a draft phase, to an analysis phase, including community meetings and surveys to present draft master plans to the finalization of a master plan. This, to me, signifies that they will have a blueprint for us in this improvement plan with community involvement. One statement from their prepared document that really struck me was based on whether we needed new buildings or renovations. This was the quote, and I quote, "The ultimate goal in every engagement process is to have the district rightfully believe that they designed their school building," unquote. I think that is a very, very important statement. To me, this statement affirms that this process will be transparent with an emphasis on community involvement. It will be imperative that members of our community jump on board opportunities when they present themselves. So I'm very pleased with the presentation that the representative TDA made and look forward to moving forward.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'm excited to see what we can put together at the community so that we can make a plan for moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I was going to.
Thank you very much.
Now, earlier, I tried to jump ahead to reports, and now here we are at reports. I apologize for that. Dr. Gase, now I'm to you.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. The Business Advisory Council did not meet, but however, we are meeting Thursday this week at, let's see, 8 a.m. It'll be at the North Central Ohio Education Service Center. However, Pat Smith gave me an update on the subcommittee reports for which the last 2 months ago's meeting, we devised 3 committees, and each of them have met on several occasions. The Career Committee, they have met and are discussing activities such as middle school having every quarter have a speaker, followed by a tour and job shadowing. at Columbian, a career fair and career day with students moving between speakers. Use science to develop a list of student interests and aptitudes. The Money Management Committee met at least twice, and they have considered activities such as bonsai for all grade levels. That's a business development for elementary through high school. Real money, real world in TMS. FAFSA a night for presenting by local financial institutions and helping parents and students plan for the future. And then Success Skills and Jobs Readiness Committee has met, and they talked about having a panel of business people present to teachers the skills needed to keep a job. And some of this could be presented on a as available bits of information, such as success cards with like 3x5 cards that a teacher could pull out whenever they have a few minutes at the end of the class to complete an activity. And these committees are open to anybody, as is the next business council meeting, which is Thursday at 8 a.m. NCOAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gase.
Mhm.
Mr. Perez with Finance Committee.
Actually, I got to the meeting after it had concluded because I was in an emergency court hearing. So I thank Dustin for covering. In fact, he got through expeditiously. I didn't make it. But I was able to get the highlights from Ms. Perry, and she did hand out the reports. I think the upcoming event is that you have to, Ms. Perry, the updated forecast is next month, correct? And then I think you also provided a report as to the status of our revenue and expenditures, where they're at right now. And I think I have to thank you. You provided us with graphs as well in terms of how our expenditures are spent. And it's mostly personnel, and that wasn't a surprise. Purchase services, direct services to our students. And I think that just goes in a way, and how we're funded, basically, how much we rely on local support and state support. So at this point, then I would ask Mr. Williams if he has any highlights from the Finance Committee meeting.
No, I think I wanted to highlight what you just brought up, some visuals, right? I think we generally look at the spreadsheets provided by Mrs. Perry, and there's a lot of numbers there, right? And it's
I enjoyed the graphs as well,
Yeah,
where they
as
show
they-
compared to last year. And I think that's, as a board, we like to see that. And I think the public likes to see that. I
Yeah.
can understand that.
it's a little more consumable than some of those spreadsheets,
Right.
right? So I think those are going to continue to evolve over time, and just kind of seeing that, September was one of the months where there's 3 payrolls. Was that correct? So, just seeing some of the cyclical nature, right? Why we might have more expenses in certain months than others. So I think we're starting to build some things that are more educative and informative in nature outside of the checks and the details of where all the money's going. So I think there's a lot of exciting things. This is going to sound silly. There's a lot of exciting things happening in finance.
It was that, and I think the insurance payout too was this month. So you get to see the way wow, it hits you all at once. And thank you for the job you do there. Any questions for Ms. Perry then? And then do you anticipate meeting next month, or do you need that time to prepare for the forecast?
The forecast will be ready for next month's meeting, so we will definitely meet, and then I need to submit it to ODE by the end of the month, so the board needs to approve it.
Thank you all. That brings us to myself with support services. We had a great group there. We met on October 14th, and we had some information shared from food services. And they're really working to increase excitement around food service and doing various incentives like cake bites and cookies to get students buying lunches. We did learn that Mr. Weber's team is revamping the way that grade cards are delivered. Mr. Cogner shared various pieces from the transportation department that they were doing T1 reports, which is capturing a number of students who are riding, and they were also doing bus evacuation drills. Last week was National Bus Safety Week. The transportation department was conducting a coloring contest. Mr. Daniel did the maintenance department report. Klaus Construction is completing work on the Pay It Forward building starting mid-November. Garmin Miller is finalizing the tennis court specifications and will put it out for bid in the middle of January. We did get a new lawnmower to replace the 20-year-old one. And the high school flagpole has been installed, and the middle school flagpole is being repaired. There were a number of pieces that were being researched over the past month, and this included the gap account, which required that all the buildings were listed with the date they were acquired, which turned into a fun exploration into records and figuring out when all of our various buildings and land were required. I don't remember what the oldest one was, but it was. Do you remember, Dr. Gaze?
The oldest building?
1932, but we
We
got
had some,
land.
there was some land in 1866,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really
Or
neat.
the East Junior High. It was 18.
When was that? Would that be the land that Columbian's actually on right now? Wasn't there a school there?
Well-
So that would have been late 1800s, right? This is turning into history lesson.
It is. Sorry, but it was really neat. And then of course we discussed the process of looking at pre-bond services and have since made a decision. So we had a great meeting, very productive meeting, and our next meeting will be November 18th in the admin building. Personnel committee did not meet, neither did records committee. So then that takes us back over to you, Mr. Perez.
Same report as last month. We're still waiting. We have the elections coming up, and then we'll see what happens with the quote lame duck session afterwards and see what bills get passed at that point. I'm sure there'll be a rush to get them all passed before the start of the school year, and then we'll have to deal with them. But just a reminder, go out and vote.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, over to you for the next two.
Nothing for student achievement, but on the policy and governance, we did meet earlier this month, and two items here that we wanted to bring forward for the board. I'm going to go in the reverse order here. We've discussed these social media guidelines for the board in the past. We've had a reading of those, so we wanted to kind of just bring that up as just something that the board can adopt, not necessarily vote on as a policy, but just sort of a general adoption similar to our operating principles. Just again, a guidance for how we can use and should be using social media, and some guidelines about what's appropriate and inappropriate to use those accounts for. So again, I think we've done a reading of those, so I don't think we need a vote on that, but just sort of a general agreement that would be a principle that we would adopt as a board. So the next one is the beginning of a discussion. It's again, it's the first bullet point here, the pre-approval for superintendent spending. So I wanted to introduce this topic, expecting that we'll have a few months here that we'll be going over this, expectation that we start a dialogue today, and then we've got a couple readings coming up, and with the anticipation that if we do move forward, this would be something we would adopt at the organizational meeting in January. The basic tenet here, there's and Mr. Richards, I'll let you go into some more detail, but just the basics of it. We go through a lot of things monthly that are things that we're required to adopt by law, and not that we wouldn't ever have a situation where we don't want to adopt one of those, but they tend to be things we need to adopt, or things that might be time sensitive, or things that are under a certain dollar amount. So we want to start the dialogue about what maybe a pre-approved option would be for the superintendent and treasurer to exercise under certain circumstances. So I'll let Mr. Richards give a little bit more detail there.
Well, and one of the things, and Mr. Williams captured it well, is that it's not fun for a board of education to have to vote on things that you really don't have much of a say in doing. I think sometimes we've said, what would happen if you said no to this? Well, some of these things are already in the works and are mandated by the courts or mandated by other outside agencies that we are required to follow. And so what some districts have done is to look at a dollar figure where we say, if it meets these certain conditions, and that this would have to be put in policy, and obviously Mrs. Perry would need to be involved in that as well to make sure that whatever we're doing would be able to comply with audits, but is sitting there making certain that if there's a threshold, and it's whatever the board would be comfortable with, but we could say, we don't have to go back and take board action on this. Let me give you some examples that I used with the finance committee. The policy committee. Qualtrics is a great one. Last month we approved that, so we can start working on that, and I think Mrs. Tewitt has another meeting tomorrow on that, so we can move forward. There wasn't anything urgent at that time. The fact that we had to wait a few weeks to be able to board approve that, there was nothing imperative. Time wasn't of the essence. We could sit there and wait for that. But yet again, that was under a certain dollar figure. If we would have needed to have moved more quickly, our current practice and policy does not allow us to be able to move more quickly. Now, in that situation, I like using that example because it's better to talk about examples that aren't problems than ones that are sometimes, because we get emotional about the ones that are problems. So Qualtrics is a perfect example. There was no need to have to rush on that. We were able to wait. We waited for the board meeting. There's zero problems there. But are there other situations and other potentialities where timeliness is valued and we wouldn't be able to respond in a timely manner to be able to satisfy certain other conditions or problems? We make a lot of decisions, and this is not a great situation for myself or you guys to be a part of, where we're starting to have to move ahead on certain things based upon the hope that you are going to vote yes, because we have to get certain things moving, and that's not a good position for any parties to be in as we move forward. So we had a discussion, as Mr. Williams said, and I agree with him. This part needs to be part of an ongoing discussion about how can we look at making sure the district is nimble enough to respond appropriately, but yet there is still the appropriate oversight and supervision of that. And I'm saying this knowing that we're talking about me, so that it's not well, we're just giving the superintendent a blank check to go do whatever they want. There needs to be those checks and balances. And so, as we discussed, we want to be able to talk with a whole board about that as a topic moving forward. As Mr. Williams said, and I think he said it exceptionally well, to make certain that we just start that conversation. Nothing for board approval tonight, nothing to look at, or we've looked at some examples when we had our policy committee, but just wanted to start getting some discussion and feedback and thoughts and feelings about this general topic.
So, okay, so we weren't all at this meeting.
Correct.
So, like, examples that I have come to mind. First of all, I think there's the standard services provided through an IEP or something like that. We get to vote on theirs, like if a parent does transportation. But then we also have categories like we approved a band trip. Like, is that something really the board has to approve? Or, you know, a wrestling overnight or basketball trip or something? And that might be a different requirement because I see you looking there. Or I've always wondered about like the stipends that we approve it's in the consent, but it could be a teacher that gets like $100. It's, you know, and at some point we have administrators, and I understand there has to be oversight, but I think that's why we have a treasurer as well. So
I think that's a different issue, although it's tangential on the overnights. When you do those, the board's basically sanctioning that you're authorizing for that, and we can talk about that in the policy group. There's some pros and cons to that as well, but I think what we were really focused on was a dollar figure. There's a number of items that we sometimes, just even in the short period of time that I've been here, where we come to the board for some items that financially aren't extensive, and that we are very bluntly required to be able to provide, and yet we take votes on those and we take time. And so Mrs. Perry and I had a meeting today with one of our topics is approving the updated financials with our agreement with the ESC, and they said, well, can you guys just sign that? We're like, actually, no, that's part of a board agenda. Now that's a bigger dollar figure, so that one's fine. But there are other situations like that where it might be prudent to be able to respond more adeptly in a timely fashion. So I think those are the things that we're talking about. But yet again, and Ms. Perry may want to weigh in, because we do have to be able to satisfy anything that per policy and per ORC guidelines and from what an auditor needs to do. And so we don't want to do anything that puts us at odds with the auditor's office.
Yeah. Payroll, for example, anything that is paid to an employee as compensation, regardless of the amount, whether it's minimal or significant, that has to be approved by the board. Only the board can compensate an employee. Only the board can employ. So the auditors will always look for that authority. In other cases that Ben's talking about, sometimes those are just purchase services that don't have a contractual agreement to them. Those don't necessarily have to be board approved.
And there's a number of times where those purchase services also contain pieces that are confidential or shouldn't be necessarily discussed here as well. Would those be some of those ones you're also talking about?
Yeah, and those are the things that I'm talking about. Yes, absolutely, Dr. McBride, where it is a contract. The nebulous area is what's the distinction between a purchase service and a contract? Because almost every purchase service involves a contract. Even when Ms. Tuitt and I worked with Qualtrics, there was a contract with Qualtrics. Now, that's very much a purchase service. But making certain that we help flesh out that distinction between purchase service and contract, so that we can maybe just operate more efficiently, would be helpful.
Any other thoughts or questions around this discussion?
No, not for me. I think we wanted to bring this to the board tonight again to get some general feedback, to get a sense of, if we should stop discussing this, right? Because that'd be good for us to know on the policy committee, right? To focus on other things, but just to get it in front of you, just to get the feedback if there's any particular guidelines that you felt strongly about. Our intent is to draft a policy. And again, bring it to the board over the next few months with the intent to have something adopted at the organizational meeting. If that's as far as we want to take it, right? This could still end up, we draft some policies and we take a look and we decide no. Yeah, we just want to kind of let the board know what we were discussing, get some basic feedback, see if there's any basic guidelines you wanted to provide at this time so we can start to structure that policy.
Well, and I think tied in with the organizational meeting, at every organizational meeting in January, you give the superintendent the authorization to hire people prior to board meetings so that we can function effectively. And I think this is that same kind of MO where we can have the authorization to be able to work effectively. However, when we bring those names before the board always still has a checks and balance to that. And we always have to tell people, and Mr. Bose is sitting behind me, probably nodding, saying it's what we do, that when we hire people, we say, we're going to get you started, we're going to do all this pending board approval. And we always say that, but it allows us to actually begin the work that we need to do. We're not going to sit there and leave a teaching vacancy because, well, man, we had a teacher resign day after a board meeting, so now we have to wait a month to fill it, even though we've got somebody that'll start next week. We put those practices in so that we can respond a little bit more adeptly, and that's what this conversation is.
Okay. And that's I think that's all for the policy committee report this time. So we'll intend to bring some language at the next meeting then. Okay.
All right. I believe that brings us to 4.02, which takes us over to Mr. Richards.
So just some general updates. Yet again, the administrative team is working really diligently on November 21st and 22nd to make certain that we have some high quality professional development for our staff in some key foundational areas. I'm looking forward to that. Yet again, Mrs. Spar has put out for anybody elementary age that is needing childcare for those days can go on and online and be able to sign up or contact the district office and we can get them taken care of. Dr. McBride pointed out that we attempted to do grade cards. We were half successful with that on Friday, and I literally mean half. We were great in the middle school and high school. It went off without a flaw. I believe I even saw Mr. Williams at the football game on Friday, and he said, "Hey, I think we're having some problems." I'm like, "No, we were great." I looked at them personally. I have a middle school student and I have a high school student. And I saw their grade cards just fine. He goes, "Not so sure about that." At the elementary, it only put 1 page out of 2 pages. So it was successful. It was a great back and forth between Mr. Williams and myself. We were successful 6 through 12. We have a little bit more improvement that we need to do on those 2-page report cards that they do in the elementary. But I appreciate all of the work that everybody has been doing to try to get us to that point. We are making some progress. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully this next time around we will have worked out the kinks and figured out how to get a 2-pager done for the elementary school. As on point B, I've now heard it on WTTF 2 times this morning because I had the radio on. It is public now knowledge that we have filed a lawsuit against JBA, and this is for the track out at Columbian High School. And some of you have substantially more experience with this than I do, and I'm happy to let anybody be able to chime in if you want. However, from my conversations, we paid money for a track to be installed. The moment it was installed, it was not up to the expectations and standards that was stated in the contract. It has been that way for a few years now. We have worked to try to resolve that through other channels. Those have been unsuccessful. And so as a last-ditch effort, we are having to avail ourselves to the legal system. I don't think, I won't speak on behalf of the board. You guys are capable of doing that on your own. I think probably all of us wish we would have been able to resolve this in any different way. However, we are stewards of taxpayer dollars. Our community entrusted us with funds to put in a top-notch track. We did not get what we pay for, and so it's really simple as far as I'm concerned. We're simply ensuring that our taxpayers get what the funds were allocated for. It's not a personal thing or anything. We are stewards of taxpayer dollars, and our taxpayers entrusted us with money to put in a high-quality track, and that is not what we received. So I didn't know if anybody else wanted to weigh in on that point as I was going through some updates. And then finally, just talking about safety protocols. A few weeks ago, we had a security situation at Noble Elementary. And I know I've gotten a few upset phone calls or actually emails, and I've responded to those. And a few people that just posted on Facebook whenever we could find out how to get a hold of any of those people, we'd call them as well. I just want to make certain that everybody in our community understands that there are times and situations, and I fully recognize that in today's day and age, everybody wants to know everything about a situation, to have all the facts in front of them. And I truly respect that and understand that. But there are times and situations where we are not able to release all the information that we are privy to. And I understand as a parent that that's frustrating. That's easy to come from me because I get to know everything. But we sit there and we make decisions about kids' safety. That is at the foremost of every decision. On that particular day in question, I couldn't be more proud of the entire administrative team. When they realized that there was a situation, they immediately followed proper protocols to ensure that kids were kept safe. We did keep kids safe. The entire time we made sure to take measures to keep kids safe. And I know that people want more details. And I truly appreciate that. But I think one of those things that we're going to have to work on is making sure we build that trust level back up, that when we say we are working to keep the kids safe, that they understand that we are doing everything necessary to keep our kids safe. And when we sit there and say, and we're putting out messages to make certain that, in that case, for people to stay away from Noble Elementary as a request, that wasn't a request just for our benefit. It's actually a request to make sure that the people coming there are safe. It was a request to make certain that police officers could do their jobs without interference so that we could resolve the situation more quickly. So I just wanted to be able to talk about the safety protocols is something that we will continually explore. I think there was a lot of things that we did exceptionally well on that date, and I thank the staff at Noble Elementary, Mr. Newlove, and the administrative team, who all responded professionally and quickly and appropriately. But there are certain things behind the scenes I think we can improve a lot on, and we're already having some conversations about that. But I just want to make sure I reassure the community that student safety is at the foremost of what we do. And if we're not able to share some things that you're hoping that you want to hear, there's probably a reason for it, that we simply can't share those things. So I just wanted to be able to talk about that, and if the board had any comments that they wanted to make about that topic either.
I think one of the pieces of information, Mr. Richards, I think I shared this with you before, the definition of soft lockdown, and just if it's a situation in the school, near the school, or around the school, and some of the implications that particularly at the the time of day that it occurred during transit, right? That obviously has a cascading effect to the other schools and transportation. So I think that was some of the main feedback I heard, and some of the things I think we could clean up a little.
So I can help define that as well. A soft lockdown is when we are during the day, and Mr. Williams is right, that was pretty dang close to dismissal time, which was difficult. But we kept all the doors locked so no one could get in or out of the building. Kids could go around to the bathrooms. This wasn't a barricade in place, close the door, hide under the corner, turn off the lights. It wasn't that situation. A soft lockdown is when there is a threat in and around the vicinity. I could give examples from my career of times where we've had to implement something like that. And the goal is just to make certain that we keep safe all the kids that are in staff that are inside the buildings. And the staff at Noble did a wonderful job on that. The kids, while they were in the building, were 100% safe. If we would have dismissed them, there was a potential risk to them. And so we didn't want to engage in that potential risk. And I know some people, it's a little bit bittersweet, and we'll find that sweet spot. I've heard, well, we need to make sure the district is communicating more. Then we got, my goodness, you guys communicated 5 times in 30 minutes with us. And that's because each time that we communicated, there was a different update, and we wanted to make certain that we kept the district informed. I'm looking back at Mrs. Sparra that was back there. She'd send one email out, and I'd say, all right, now we need to send something out. And she'd go, I just sent one out. I'm like, well, we're going to be sending another one. And so she did it again, and she kept up on that exceptionally well. But we do want to make certain that we communicate with people at each stage when there is information along the process with security issues.
And I think one of the things we also talked about is that with that fluidity, maybe looking into creating some sort of a flowchart or an infographic of what that's going to look like, because I would not expect, even as a parent with kids in the district, I wouldn't expect that we're the first call, especially when you're working with law enforcement or things like that. Like, there are things that have to be tended to. And then as soon as you are able to, as soon as there's a moment to do that communication will happen, and that it will happen swiftly, and that you will send updates. But some sort of making all of us aware of what that typically looks like, and that sometimes the district is also directed by law enforcement, and that there are times where you have to step aside and say, absolutely, tell me how you want me to handle this. And that it's not always appropriate to share all of the information, whether that is because of safety piece or confidentiality piece.
Correct.
Thank you and all of the team for how all of these incidents have been handled, and then for going back after each of them and doing a debriefing. What did we do well? Where do we improve? I think that's how we continue to succeed. Any other pieces for D?
Yeah, I would just say, I know it was a little disruption for some people. In fact, I heard from my neighbor right away immediately, but I'm glad that the district is showing that we put safety first. And I think that's our priority here from the board, is that we want safety first. So.
Any other thoughts? All right, this brings us to item number 5, which is the opportunity for the public to address the board. Each person addressing the board gives their name and address. If several people wish to speak, each person is allotted 3 minutes until the total time of 30 minutes is used.
Carissa Allen, 135 Clinton Avenue. As I was sitting here tonight, I got a text in from somebody who wasn't able to make it. Simply wanting to state that there's a lot of disappointed people in our district due to the failure to promote all of our sports. Girls cross country was, I believe, second in districts. It was, what was it? And having the best results in Division I in the 23 years. And there's been nothing like on social media. There's been kind of really nothing posted about that. And I mean, that's something I think we should be promoting quite strongly. And just so you know, girls are running 3:45 at Hedges Boyer Park this weekend. So I don't know if it's supposed to be as beautiful as last weekend, but try and get out and support our girls, because they are a phenomenal group of young ladies. They represent Tiffin City very proud. I have a daughter on the junior high team, and these are girls that are role models true role models for the younger generation. So thank you.
Thank you, Carissa. This brings us to our consent agenda. Consent agenda includes 6.01, approving the minutes of the September board meeting, 6.02, approving the treasurer's report for September, 6.03, employment, 6.04, statement of purpose, budget reports for 2022-2023, 6.05 is stipends, 6.06 is donations and grants, 6.07 fund-to-fund transfer, and 6.08 certificate of fiscal officer. I would entertain a motion to approve 6.01 through 6.08.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Perez, Dr. Gase,
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth,
Yes.
Dr. McBride.
Yes. We're now at action items with 7.01 being adopt a resolution seeking then design architecture for pre-bond services. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
And this is just to authorize me as the superintendent to work on a contract. The plan would be in November to come back with an actual contract for the board to approve to work with then design architecture.
Thank you. Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Kizabeth,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Gase,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Dr. McBride.
Yes. 7.02, approve fiscal year 23 NCO ESC mid-year foundation update. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
So in working with the ESC, like every other entity that we work with, costs are going up. Mrs. Perry will probably check my math later on and I'll get scolded. But I believe the increase is going to represent almost a 5.25% increase off of what was anticipated. However, the ESC has been gracious enough through some other grant funding and other sources that they have to decrease that impact so that it's only about a 1.25% increase. And Mrs. Perry will probably check my math later on to see if I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close. I'm rounding a little bit because I'm not a treasurer, but I'm pretty close to the math there. So I do appreciate the ESC trying to assist us so that we didn't face the full brunt of those price increases. And it's like everywhere else. When people are going to the grocery store, you're paying more money for everything. You go to the gas pump, you're paying more for everything. Most other entities are having to increase their prices to be competitive. So I understand why the ESC is doing it, but I also appreciate their willingness to try to be creative to assist us so that it wasn't a shock to our system. So it's a 1.25% increase instead of 5.25%. Yet again, not a math major. That sounds like 4% difference that they saved us. So I appreciate their efforts.
Thank you.
From a budgeted perspective for next year, are you seeing the same thing or?
They're using a grant that is potentially a 2-year grant, but they can't guarantee that they will be allowed to use it for the same purpose next year. So they hope to, but they couldn't guarantee it.
And this is for special needs students, correct?
This is for our total contract for all services through the ESC.
Okay.
This is for everything that we contract with the ESC for, including the next 2 points that you're going to see on the agenda as well.
My understanding after talking to Mr. Richards, the original contract that we sign every year is a projected cost, and this adjustment has the potential to happen every year.
Yes.
Okay. It just happens that this year it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, the only thing that adjusts is if we use more or less services. That's typically what happens. And then at the end of the year, you guys always approve a true up for that contract of what we actually expended. Most of the time, we're going to say, yeah, we used a little bit more than we budgeted, so we're going to have to pay a little bit more. In a perfect world, we say, hey, we used less than what we needed and we get a credit back. But that is the system that we work with. And on this time, they had to increase their costs to be very bluntly more competitive.
Any other questions? Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Perez? Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.03, approve NCO ESC Braille Services Program contract.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. It speaks for itself.
Yep.
Any questions? Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.04, approve NCO ESC Technology Services Program contract.
So moved.
Second.
Same.
Mrs. Perry?
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes, excuse me. 7.05, approve GLCAP MOU. Entertain a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Richards?
This is for a partnership with the Great Lakes Community Partnership and Head Start Program. My understanding is this is a commitment that we re-up every 2 years, and so this is just making certain that we sign that we are still partnering with them for services.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.06, approve letter of concurrence regarding transfer of sick leave.
So moved.
Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Richards?
This is my understanding, we have past precedent from, with an agreement with the Teachers Association to transfer sick leave between spouses for different purposes, and we are doing so again at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Mrs. Perry?
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Perez seconded.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.07, approve administrator contract.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
We now have an assistant food service supervisor for, I think, the first time in like a year and a half. So we've gone a while without filling it. So happy to have that position finally filled.
So to clarify, we're not creating a new position. We're just
No.
filling one that's been vacant.
Yeah, we are filling one that's been vacant.
Wonderful. We welcome them to this role. Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Perez? Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.08, approve single case agreement and funding authorization.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
This would be an example of kind of what we were talking about with the policy committee of one that we have to be able to provide these services. So, and that'll be the same thing for 7.09 while I'm on here as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.09, in that same vein, approve Wheeler Pediatric Services Agreement.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Perez? Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. 7.10, approve goals and objectives for the superintendent. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So let's have a discussion about this. The board has worked as a unit with both Dustin and Mr. Perez, Mr. Williams and Mr. Perez, taking time to put together the draft of our goals and objectives based off of our meetings. Anybody else like to speak to the process?
Yeah, I think we could say that's what the executive session was that we came out of right before this to sort of reaffirm those prior to this. We broke this down into quarterly objectives for the superintendent. The quarterly objectives starting August 1st based on those quarters, not the typical calendar quarter. So anybody good with calendar math notices that we are quickly approaching the end of that first quarter. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of review those verbally here.
Sure.
Okay. So for the first quarter, which is August through October, establishment of visibility within the district and community, and an assessment of the overall state of the district. And do we have a date for when we're planning on doing the state of the district?
I think we were November 21st.
Okay.
I think it's that first Monday of break when we're doing remote learning.
Okay, very good. And then the second quarter, which is November through January, gather some metrics about key programs and activities. Quarter three, which is February through April, the establishment of a communication plan for the district and a plan for addressing gaps in student achievement. And then for the fourth quarter, which is May through July, plan for strengthening partnerships with area career centers, improving the processes for Tornado Academy, special education, and open enrollment. And we have a few stretch goals for the superintendent for this year. One is for a facilities master plan, and one is for a district-wide strategic plan. We have a few bullet points that go beneath those with some additional details, and I believe this becomes a public document, so I don't necessarily want to read the document word for word here, but those are the highlights quarter by quarter of the plan.
And I think I want to make sure that we highlight that it is a public document, but also that we as a board and as a superintendent, we've entered into this one as a level of accountability to the community. We went through the entire search process for our superintendent at kind of an unprecedented level of engagement and transparency, and we are doing this process as well in that same vein. That the work doesn't stop at hiring a superintendent, that's just when the work begins. And so I'm excited at the process that we had to develop these goals and also for what they each encapsulate. Any other board members' thoughts?
And I will say I welcome the feedback from the board. I think it's frustrating sometimes in a district where we have different expectations of one another. So making certain that we kind of codify those expectations is, I think, helpful for the board, and it's helpful for me and my administrative team. As the cabinet members that are here because it falls under their duty as assigned by their supervisor, and that's why they're here, in addition to being just good people. I've said that these goals will magically find their way into becoming goals for them as well, because we are aligned as a district and we want to have that transparency of that we are all working towards the same thing. So I very much appreciate, I don't want anybody to sit there and think that this is something that's been done to me. I'm a very willing participant in this, and I appreciate the board's leadership to make certain that we are all on the same page and heading in the same direction.
And with that, so that the district and the community are aware that these are pieces that we will be checking in at checkpoints throughout the year and evaluating, giving feedback, and that these are components of your employment, but also that lead the success of the district. Mr. Kisbeth, did you have a thought?
Yes, it's a living document. It's not like and I got to be careful because I've worked with different boards, and we have a strategic plan. It's not a strategic plan that sits on the shelf and you never look at it again. But this will be a living document that will continue to evaluate and adjust and adapt as necessary, with obviously communication with our superintendent.
Any other pieces? Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. That brings us to item 8, I believe, which is board discussion.
I have one item for board discussion, and I'll need some guidance on how to approach this. We have the Capitol Conference coming up here in the middle of November, prior to the next board meeting, and there is some items we'll need to go over. And I don't know how in depth we've gone into this in the past, but they're essentially, my understanding is establishing the legislative platform of the OSBA. Right, so each district sends a delegate, and they represent the will of the district, I guess. So it's a rather lengthy document. So we'll be reading it. We'll take turns reading a chapter, I think.
So It's not one that I think that we had discussed previously. And last year I was the alternate and had the opportunity to go. But because of that, because I was the alternate, I didn't have that document prior to. And it was a really neat process because each district is represented in a large conference or a large ballroom, actually. And they bring forth all of these materials that were sent out prior to. And then you vote using color cards. And they capture all of the votes that way. But that way it is a majority, a consensus of all the districts on where OSBA puts their resources or what they write their policy as. And so it is pretty impactful because they have numerous lobbyists and resources that they then use to move forward with, and that leads or directs their next year.
I did it the year before, 2 years before you, I think, but I was an alternate too for, I believe it was then Mr. Henry. So I didn't have much preparation other than here's the thing. I don't think we've ever been in a process that we all go back to the board, review what comes out to get a consensus. I think it's supposed to be done that way, but we've never been that form.
Well, I can certainly make the content available to everyone on the board. You know, I realize outside of a public meeting, we can't deliberate anything, but I can certainly make all the material available. And if there's any particularly strong opinions, I can make sure to convey those. But yeah, just so that everybody is kind of aware, the language in it is a lot of, like I said, it's about their legislative platform, but it's a lot of, we will support legislation that, or we will not support legislation that, right? So it's a lot of those phrases, right? It's fairly lengthy.
And a lot of times it ends up being around where funding, what areas they will address funding for or against.
Has anybody seen a schedule from that conference? I keep trying.
Yeah.
And what?
Yeah.
I looked online. I couldn't. Of course, that could be me. I couldn't find it. I've looked a couple times.
Nope.
Do we have a start time on that Sunday?
We'll get it to you. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Thanks.
middle of the day. It's
All
not.
right.
It's not early in the morning. It's middle of the day.
Okay.
But
It's good to know.
We'll make sure you get it, Mr. Kitzman. And you'll get those materials out to all of us.
yes, it will.
Perfect. Any other pieces for board discussion? Oh, so Carissa, you shared that we have a girls team running on Saturday. Saturday, 3:45, Hedges Boyer. Regionals. Awesome. So anybody who is able to go and support our runners, that would be excellent. Mr. Perez, it looks like you have pieces to share.
Yeah, actually, I was going to lead off with that highlight. I was just verifying, that's why I was checking my phone to verify the start time on the OHSAA site because there's been different. I think it has 3:45 for girls D1, which is their category at Hedges Boyer. And they would really be happy to see everyone come out and support them. We had a modest little but mighty student section at the districts. Our superintendent and I believe Mr. DeVore were there for the SBCs as well. And that's when the boys and girls both won the SBC Lake Division. Boys third year in a row, girls 5 years in a row. But that day, the middle school kids, boys won first, girls took runner up. And it's flipped the other way. Girls took, okay, either way, we have a strong program. And kudos to the coaches that keep it going. But again, the girls I know are excited. They have a chance, hopefully, to get out of regionals and move on. I don't want to name any, but I will. There's Grace, Kelsey, there's Abby, Dallas, and Carmen are the top 5. There's more. There's a lot more, but I'm not going to name them all. But just so people understand, at the districts, Kelsey ran that race that morning. I think we're actually morning or late afternoon. Then went and played in tennis. I believe she played in 3 matches that day. Our players our runners are dedicated, but I think it goes across all our activities. Football also completed 7th, 8th grade. I believe they only had 1 loss. I might be wrong, but they were also champions as well. We all know about varsity football. The game is Friday. Tickets are available online only, correct, Mr. Kisbeth? No cash sales at the door, so.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so get your tickets early. And last game, it was senior night for the band. And many kudos to the band members that were there. They got to do their Gangnam Style dance for everyone as their senior dance. And also cheer was there. This is the cheer shirt with their mini cheer camp. Was it close to 200 kids that were there, I think? So kudos on that program as well. And tennis, and this, I have to applaud someone. I don't know who it was, if it was superintendent, our principal, but at the Friday game, they also honored our fall champions, which was really nice to see. So the cross country team came out, the boys golf team as well. They did win the SBC, but weren't able to go further. Girls tennis also won their SBC as well. And I think Kelsey won Saturday, but then Thursday was not able to advance beyond that. And I was also able to go out and see boys and girls soccer this year. Wasn't able to go to as many games as I wanted to, but I was there for senior night for the boys. And something that might surprise a lot of people is we have several people from Calvert, students, that are part of that team. And the key members of the team, our goalie, I believe it's Mr. Shirk, is from Calvert as well. Did a phenomenal job. He won't think so, but he played an amazing game when I saw him. Girls also had their cancer night and were able to win their game. And just for those going to those games, I would advise you to keep your eye on, is it Mia Zeiss? Very fast, very good goal scorer. But again, we're turning to winter sports, and I believe tonight was the viewing for the musical coming up. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say what the musical's, oh, we are?
It is now public knowledge. You are allowed to share.
It will
Mr.
be Footloose. And so things keep going fast and furious in our district. And I think that's something that the students and the athletes all point out, is that Tiffin may be small, but we are mighty. And so these kids, you give them the opportunity and they run with it. So again, Saturday, come out and cheer on cross country.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Any other pieces for board discussion?
Oh, wait, I forgot one. Sorry about this. Girls volleyball, middle school won their championship as well. We don't want to leave them out. And volleyball did it, they're there too. So let's not forget about them.
At this point, I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session to consider dismissal of a public employee with no action afterwards. Is that accurate? Correct. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Perry?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes.
And just to clarify, I think we're talking about the employment of an employee, not a dismissal. If anybody's watching and
I probably just
freaked
panicked
out.
everybody.
Yeah. So just really fast.
So the X threw me off. So
Yeah,
we are
it's okay.
considering
Just want to clarify.
We are considering the employment, not dismissal. Thank you.